I'm gonna take my phone off the hook so it doesn't ring up here.
All right, everyone. This is Sergio Marrero and we're on Rebel One Live. We're here today with Tony Wilkins. Tony Wilkins is, Tony, you've been an amazing investor in the Chicago ecosystem. I remember coming to the ecosystem and everyone was like, "You got to know Tony." I was like, "Who's Tony?" He was like the godfather in the angel startup space. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure, Sergio.
And just to give a little background, Tony Wilkins, private investor, founder of Standing Oaks Venture Partners, and startup coach, and also a Chicago native as well. So I look forward to hearing more. If you can share a little bit more about your background. I know you've been in angel investing for quite a while. If you can just share more color as to what you do and how you got there.
Yeah. So what I do is really, really simple. I spend all my time talking to early stage entrepreneurs, founders, trying to find out, what out of the, 800 or 900 people I talk to in a year, who am I going to write the 4 or 5 checks that I write to? And that's my entire day. I have a portfolio of about 20 founders that are active at any given time, from the ones that are coming in to the ones that are either exiting at the top or falling off because we just couldn't make the product market fit. So the pool is about 20 who I advise and coach and mentor and connect and try to, make sure we both have a good outcome with our intelligent lottery tickets in the early stage space. The companies that I'm looking for, my investment philosophy is probably a little narrower than most angels because I come from an institutional asset management background. So I'm looking for globally scalable, disruptively efficient digital properties run by amazing entrepreneurs and their teams where I can get 10 times my return within 10 years before dilution. So that's a mouthful, but it's the narrow keyhole that I start looking down. And from all that, I say that I invest early enough that there's not enough data to rely on. I'm investing in DNA. So I'm looking for entrepreneurs who have what I call the big 6. Okay, so it's chemistry. I really dig them. It's integrity. It's coachability, which is, we'll talk about that later, but coachability is not even discussable. If you can't be coached, we can't talk. Then there's responsiveness, resilience, and resourcefulness. So the 3 R's in the IC: responsiveness, resiliency, resourcefulness, coachability, chemistry, and integrity. Those are the things I'm looking for. And that's 85% of the decision process. So I'm constantly trying to meet people who do that, whether or not I invest with them now or later, or we develop a relationship down the road that pays off. I'm constantly trying to find those folks. And then the other part of my time when I'm not sleeping or trying to have some fun or eating is coaching generally founders who have gotten their first VC investment. And they're saying, hey, I was scrappy trying to get everything done. And now I've got these institutional investors who are asking me for, formal KPIs, a board member. They want me to change perhaps my mission. They want me to scale up fast. They want me to bring money in. How do I deal with all this at the same time? Usually my VC partners who I've invested with over the years will say, hey, Tony, we don't want to tell them exactly what to do, but we'd like you to be their coach and give them an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. So I try to, in everything I do, my objective is to minimize, help people avoid avoidable mistakes and then shorten their learning curves. So that's what I'm doing now and have been doing really very intensively for the past 10 years. And then less intensively 10 years before that. I wrote my first angel investing check in November of 1991. That investment promptly, after about a year and a half, went to 0. And like football, first time you get your bell rung, you either strap your helmet on and say, ooh, let's do that again.
Yep.
Or you take the helmet off and say, I think badminton is the sport for me. So
you put the helmet on.
I put the helmet back on because prior to that, I went to Northwestern, I went through electrical engineering, and I figured when I got out of Northwestern, I would not ever have to go to school again. And electrical engineering would be the job that would let me live in that for 30 years and retire with a gold watch. So I went to work for Chrysler in the late 70s, actually. And I thought, wow, I love Detroit. I love Chrysler cars. I love Lee Iacocca. This is going to be 30 years. I'm going to be here and retire, like right about now with the gold watch. And I got laid off after my first year.
Wow.
And I went, I did not come up from the South Side and go to Northwestern and spend all this blood, sweat, and tears to have to go back and live in Harry Wilkins' basement.
That's it.
So I kind of decided, hey, I need to find a way to bring money in from a lot of different sources. And as I looked around, investing was the way to do it. A friend of mine, a couple of years into my engineering career, said, hey, investment bankers make this much money. And I looked at how much money they made and how much money I was making.
Yep.
And I did the math, I added one to the one I carried to. I was like, I can't be an engineer anymore. So I went to business school at University of Chicago part-time, finished up and went into asset management and was in the institutional asset management business doing a variety of things, managing portfolios, selling asset management services, being an executive for 34 years, and have been doing this full time now for about 3 years.
I love it. I love it. And I love exactly how you showed the pivots, the real story of jumping in and being hit hard and putting the helmet back on. And I like the phrase, I invest in DNA, because it's early in the game,
right?
Especially with early stage entrepreneurs. I've talked to a number of investors. You invest earlier than a number that I speak to, and I just love the coaching aspect that you talk about. Can you share a little bit more about that coaching work that you do?
Sure.
And building relationships with those early stage founders when you haven't yet, maybe put in money.
Yeah. So in most of the companies that I've invested in, what they eventually become successful in accomplishing has almost nothing to do with what they started off with. Or it's a very small percentage of what they started off with. Somebody might have said, hey, Tony, I got an idea that I'm gonna compete with Six Flags. I'm gonna just have an amusement park. And I go, okay, great, but how about you build a great roller coaster first? Mm-hmm. So it's, can you adjust and narrow down so that you can do kind of a third grade science experiment to decide if what you're actually planning to do will work in the real world. I tell people all the time, Mike Tyson said, everybody comes into the ring with a plan until the first punch lands.
Yep.
My question is, once you get the first punch, how do you respond? And if you can't respond, you're never going to make it. So I spend a lot of time just kind of, showing people the path forward and let them know that, it's not a bad thing to pivot, to change in the light of incoming information. So I start off by telling people, hey, you have to be able to make an adjustment based on both intuitive and hard data feedback. And then I try to see how well they can do that. Now the people who I wind up investing in are better than I can imagine and saying, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to change. The people who I wind up not investing with are the people who haven't gotten there yet. And it's going to take them a longer time to realize, hey, you don't have all the answers that you're looking for in other people's heads. And let's figure out how to go mine other people's brains. And that's really, I think, if you ask me to boil it down to one thing, it's coachability. So I spend a lot of my time finding out, doing kind of micro tests, and then trust my instinct and verify whether somebody's coachable. And if they are, then I can help them a lot because I've done a lot of stuff. I've made a lot of mistakes and I can help people avoid them. And if they just don't get it, which is the responsiveness, a lot of times, unfortunately, when things are starting to go bad with a founder, they will clam up. I don't hear from them. They're trying to fix it on their own. That's not a good formula.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that, the micro tests as well, because I haven't. I would say even myself, I've been more on the founder side, been an investor side. Only the last few years, you have more experience coaching more founders, and that it's like as a coach, you're like how are you testing coachability?
Yeah. So question number one is, do you ask me questions?
Okay.
Right. So I if I'm talking to somebody, I say, yeah, I'm an early stage coach. I'm an early stage investor, and I'm looking for these things in the portfolio. So here's a micro test, right? I'll give you two. I'll give you two. Micro test number one is I dangle a little bit out in front of you what it is I do. If you dive into a pitch about what it is you're going to do, and you're going to boil the ocean next week, and you've got $100 million valuation, and you're looking for investors, nah, that reality check doesn't work. But if you say, wow, that's interesting, I have a big idea, I'd love to get your perspective on how you think I can move forward. Okay, that puts you in camp number two. You're coachable. I was an athlete when I was in college, in high school and college. And I was captain of my track team my junior and senior year at Northwestern. And if you are a real competitor, you want to know how you can get better. You're never good enough. You always want to know how you get better. I would go to other sprinters and say, hey man, when you're in the blocks, do you have your elbows crooked or do you have them straight? Or I would go to another coach and say, I know that your sprinters get out of the blocks faster than I've been able to. What is it that you do differently? So there's an intellectual curiosity that I use as a meta test. It's metadata for me to decide whether or not somebody is going to have that continual insatiable thirst to get better as they go on. And some of the most successful companies I've invested in, here's a meta test too, is there are some very, very successful entrepreneurs I've invested in Chicago. It cracks me up that as successful as they are, if I send them a text and say, hey man, I just experienced this with the app. It looks like it's a problem. Maybe you should get somebody on it. Invariably, they will get back to me within 24 hours, which in retrospect tells me that's why they're successful. That's one reason why they're successful. I have other entrepreneurs, I've given them a couple of ideas. I send them the same text. They call me back 3 days later and say, man, I was really busy. You're not going to make it. You're just not going to make it. Another one I call is my psychotic detection test. And this one I use more so when I'm interviewing people for roles as opposed to entrepreneurs. But the psychotic detection test is in the same vein. I go, hey, Sergio, don't answer this question, okay? I know you're not a psychotic. I don't want you to start this question. But I'll say to somebody, hey, tell me a couple things that you're working on personally or professionally to improve yourself. Now, the wrong answer is really simple. The wrong answer is, wow, that's an amazing question. I never thought about that. Let me think about that. You never thought about how you can get better personally or professionally? That's a problem. And in my world, I've gotten a little kinder and gentler now as I've gotten older, but in my world, it's not that you're a psychotic and that will never able to be work again, but where you are in your life right now is not where you and I can vibe. So I tell entrepreneurs and investors, it is almost more important to figure out who you should not be talking to anymore. Move on, than it is to find the people who are good for you. So if you can, so for me, micro tests are a way to very quickly say, yep, let me move on.
Got it. No, I love it. And I want to push on this because I can tell you're very passionate about coaching, as am I, trying to get better at that craft. One thing I think about is like, how do you toe the line between just not sending them in the wrong direction, right? Like when they may be the expert in their craft and what's going on, and you're like, hey, I think you should do X, Y, Z, and they come back and they go like, I'm doing X, which is different than what you said because, this is what I'm seeing in the field or X, Y. Like how do you balance that? So you lead them astray.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because I have to give a shout out to my man Raman Chadha at the Junto Institute, because we're all coaches and we have, I've been with Raman for 8 years now. We're constantly sharpening our saw on how to be better coaches, right? And you said something that really cracked me up. I almost never say to somebody, you should,
Mm, okay. Yeah. Love it.
or I advise. Oh man, you got to really squeeze me hard to say one of those things because as I told my son, who's an entrepreneur, when he had his company, I said, look, I don't want to give you so much advice that if you're successful, you go, I wouldn't be here if dad hadn't told me all this stuff. On the other end, if you're unsuccessful, which is a high probability for any entrepreneur who's in this space, I don't want you to say, damn, I did everything dad told me to do, and this is where it got me. No,
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore. My goal now is my philosophy on coaching is based on a quote that I saw in my Franklin Covey Daytimer like 20 years ago, which said that a great professor simply tells stories or shows the path and allows people to choose what they want to do.
Mm.
So I tell people I have all the questions. I have probably 99.7% of the questions. And the only way I'm going to give you an answer is if you really beg me, Tony, if you were in my shoes, please tell me what you would do right now. And then I'll say, hey, I'll tell you what I would do. But remember, I'm just one data point. It's your business. It's your life. You have to figure out and make your own choices. So I don't really worry about whether or not I've given somebody bad advice, because by the time I give them some advice, I've provided so much context that they know what the potential outcomes are, and it's their choice to decide it as well.
Okay, great. I love it. So, shifting gears, thank you for sharing more into the secret sauce of Tony's coaching. That's great, and defining what a startup coach is for us. Can you? I know you said you sometimes you stay around and you do different activities to help them. You say move from startup to CEO. What specifically can founders that are growing in their journey engage you to help them with?
Sure. The number one thing I think is manufacturing time. And the number two thing is figuring out how to delegate, right? There's a great book called The E-Myth Revisited. Mm-hmm. And it essentially says, if you want to have a shop, that's great. What happens in the shop? You wake up in the morning, you come in, you turn the key, you open the door, stuff gets done because you're there. And then when you leave, stuff stops getting done. That's a shop. A business is a system and a series of events and people and products and services and resources that when you wake up in the morning, people are already doing things. You're already making business. You're already making money. And when you go to bed at night, you're still making money, and you're not necessarily doing anything but organizing the human, financial, and physical resources that grow that business. Now, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, a founder who's growing a business that's going to get funded by people who want to make millions and millions of dollars when you sell that thing, you have to not only change your mindset from shopkeeper, which is what you are when you start the business, to business owner, which is what you are when you have hired some people to do some things, to leader, which means you're recruiting people to hire people to do things to grow the business, to successful leader who has people who understand what the mission is, understand how to do micro tests to bring people on, know how to motivate, pivot, produce, report, and then eventually, if you sell to a larger organization, integrate into that company or go public. So I walk people through those steps and then invite them to be very honest about making that choice of what fits. Some people really just want to be a shopkeeper. They want to do everything. God bless, do that. I can't invest in your company, and you're not going to attract venture money. But if some people, like the folks at Grubhub, Mike Adams, when they started Grubhub, they were just kind of going, hey, let's see what we can do. And then as it grew and got bigger, eventually, around 2011, they said, I wonder what it would be like to go public. And they went on and did what it took to be public. And during the course of that narrative, some people hopped off the train and said, nope, I don't want to do that. Oh, that's not what I signed up for. Oops, I don't want to be a publicly held company. So I try to provide people a perspective of what that next step looks like and what they'll need to commit to get there. That's my coaching process.
Got it. Got it. That's great. What inspired you? I know you mentioned your journey, and I would say you probably could have stayed in asset management in the investment, banking world. Why invest in startups?
Oh, it's easy. Uh, in my mind, startup founders are just more interesting people. They're trying to get something done bigger than they are. There are no constraints. The sky is the limit. Uh, I love the idea. I mean, my risk tolerance is much higher than most folks. So, in a corporate environment, you have to dial down your risk management. You have to play nicely. You have to wear a beard, not have a facial hair, and wear a suit and tie. That's cool. You make a lot of money doing that. I made a lot of money doing that. But I think for me, uh, maybe it's because I'm a Gemini. I don't know. But the one half of it is the staid senior vice president, present in boardrooms, fly in business class internationally, do the kind of stuff that they teach you to do in business school. Okay, that generates the cash. But the passion is seeing people flourish in a way that neither one of you have expected, and then seeing how things can be even better when you throw a little money, a few resources, contacts, coaching into an amazing entrepreneur to have them take off. I mean, to me, there's nothing better than having a conversation with an entrepreneur after you sold this thing for more money than you ever expected was going to happen.
That's great. And shifting to the Chicago ecosystem, what are your thoughts on the entrepreneurs and the ecosystem of Chicago? Why, how is it different than other areas of the U.S.?
Right. I forget where I was, but I saw a quote from Frank Sinatra, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but Sinatra said something like, "Chicago's a great town. New York is all about the dough. Los Angeles is all about the show, but Chicago is where people actually roll up their sleeves and do things."
Okay.
Now, I mean, he probably said that in the 40s or the 50s. And I think, generally speaking, that's kind of culturally the same thing. My son is a venture capitalist out in Los Angeles, and I get all kinds of stories from him about the big story ideas and the blah, blah, blah that people are going. And you really have to kind of dive down. I have founders and investment partners in New York, and they want to get straight to, how much money are we going to make? How big is this going to be? In Chicago, and I'll give St. Louis a shout out as well. We're in the Midwest a little more interested in what are you actually going to do? Mm-hmm. How are you going to generate a sustainable profit with customers who really want to buy something from you? I had this experience when I was the executive in residence at Techstars, and I love Techstars. I'm a Techstars ride or die kind of person. But Techstars works you through to demo day, where you have an amazing demo and you've got your story down crisp. Well, there's another accelerator, I can't think of the name of it, in St. Louis. I was visiting with them, and they would go, "We don't really care about what your presentation looks like. We want to know that you have customers who are repeat buyers who are generating a profitable ROI." And I was like, that's really what it's all. I said, that's the hokey pokey. That is what it's all about. Can you get customers who will continue to buy your product? So I think we're more, and some people throw rocks at us because, how are you going to get a moonshot if all you're worried about is how much profit you make? I go, I don't know. That's the way we roll here in Chicago.
Yep. Yeah. And I think those fundamentals are probably better and reigning true now that the market's turning.
Exactly right. Exactly. And I think those both coasts come by it honestly, right? And on the West Coast, there are a lot of people who have had moonshot opportunities just because of that ecosystem. So their risk tolerance is higher. They're like, okay, well, we can spend as much money as you can to get 1 million eyeballs because we know that that's going to translate at some point to some moonshot venture. Great. That's the way it is over there. I think the Midwest is a little more show me what you got.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the next question is around like how have you seen Chicago change? And to give a little context for the audience, Chicago, historically real estate investment, innovation, and in architecture. So it also third largest city by GDP in the United States. And some of the trends that have happened have been more tech companies moving there from the coast to the West Loop. You're talking about the Ubers, the Stripes, the Googles over the last few years. So with a little bit of that, do you think that's influencing the culture, or how have you seen it evolve?
So when I first started investing in early stage companies, people thought I was absolutely nuts. They're like, wait. The company doesn't have any profits. The company hasn't done anything. There's no assets that you can sell if the thing goes south. I'm like, no, we're investing in ideas and people's dreams. We're taking a shot. And they were, oh, Tony, what are you doing? You better buy yourself some real estate, boy. I hate real estate. I respect real estate, but I hate real estate
And
because
you
it's
live in
no,
Chicago, okay?
I live in Chicago, right? I hate real estate. I own real estate, but I hate it because it's kind of this steady Eddie, here you go kind of thing. For me, that's my opinion. I know lots of people made a lot of money, but in my mind, there's no intelligent lottery ticket aspect to real estate. You know, even the merchandise mart, which was a great deal for the Kennedys when they bought it, it's going to grow or shrink based on its geographic location. It's never going to be a cameo or a spot hero
Mhm.
where you wake up one day and this thing is worth 100 times what you paid for it. So I always figured, look, I'm saving money in my 401k. I put away my rainy day money. I'm saving for my kids' college. I'm going to work every day. At the other end of my financial portfolio, I better have something that has some kind of a moonshot opportunity. Chicagoans 30 years ago, that was a foreign concept. I only knew one person, Bob Garris, and his wingman, Craig Davis, who I'm still close with, who even would have a conversation with me about the idea of investing in an idea in a person as opposed to brick and mortar or a secured investment. So mezzanine investment was considered the wild thing. Okay, so you got a business, you can't get a bank loan. We'll buy your invoices, we'll advance payroll. It was very, very much so. Show me exactly what you've got, and if it doesn't show up, show me how I'm going to collect some of my money behind it. There wasn't a concept of we're going to throw some money in. If it goes away, it goes away. I give J.B. Pritzker a lot of credit for being the godfather of what I would call the early stage ecosystem in Chicago, because he visited somebody in Philadelphia one time who was the J.B. Pritzker of Philadelphia and said, why can't we do that in Chicago? You got guys like Jeff Carter and Ira Weiss, who started Hyde Park Angels, who said, look, why do we have these really bright entrepreneurs who have good ideas that come out of the University of Chicago, Northwestern, IIT, DePaul, and when they UIC, and when they get some traction, they've got to move to the West Coast because that's the only place people will roll the dice and give them a shot. Mm-hmm. So it's been very exciting watching Chicago go from people who have money saying, well, show me a bigger piece of real estate I can invest in, to, oh, wait a minute, let me put a little bit of money in these intelligent lottery tickets and these moonshot opportunities and these entrepreneurs who have promise, and actually begin to grow it. So, I'm a huge fan of 1871, Blue Lacuna, Polsky, the Garage, all these places where now there is a community where you can go and there are other people who are kind of like you. And it's been exhilarating.
And do you see a focus emerging? Is it I feel like healthcare tech with Matter and
Yep.
and food, it's a food city, so some like with they talk about Grubhub, like what do you see, some of the, are there themes that you think are central to Chicago and the surrounding area?
Yeah, there are a few themes. I mean, if you think back so let me just answer the question first. So the themes I see are logistics, healthcare, food,
Hmm.
ad tech, and insure tech.
Okay.
Logistics, healthcare, food, ad tech, and insure tech. Those are the five.
Okay.
Uh, and I think they've grown naturally out of the fact that we forget that at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, Sears Roebuck, Marshall Fields, Goldblatt's. These were the big stores that people would get the catalog and think, "Ooh, I want to buy this," and then they would send off. And they were those big companies were the Amazon of the early 1900s. So if you were moving out if you were in a covered wagon going to Homestead in North Dakota, you got your Sears catalog and you ordered your house, you ordered underwear, you ordered everything, and it came a few weeks later by mail order. So this is a mail order facility. The reason our post office is the largest one in the country is because they had to build what they needed to ship by USPS back in the day out to people across the country. That heritage, I think, spawned logistics management like Coyote. It spawned ad tech like Leo Burnett and the other things that we look at here. You know, Popular Pays is a version of ad tech. I would say that even, you know, Cameo is a company that got started because there are people who have unconscious competence in that space about how to deliver information. So I think those five verticals are the ones that we're seeing gaining some traction here in Chicago. M-Hub is also gaining traction as a maker space, but I think they would even say, hey, we are a maker in healthcare technology, maybe ad tech, insurtech.
Great. No, thanks for that insight. I like to talk about how when you look at locations and look at the competitive advantage, just like of a startup, you look at it of the location as well, because there's a ecosystem there.
Yeah. I mean, you would even say Detroit is mobility.
Yep.
But that one's almost too easy to even talk about because where Detroit came from.
That's right. The origins. I think we wouldn't do it justice if we didn't at least talk about some of the challenges you're seeing on the street with in light of COVID and our current situation. Can you share you know, some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Black Swan theory. You know, when I read the book Black Swan, I was like, yep, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. We're in a Black Swan environment right now. And I'm a big efficiency effort. I want to know where's the best place and time to devote my calories, my resources. And what Black Swan said was, look, there are highly improbable consequential events that will occur. Your job, don't waste time trying to rationalize why it happened or cry over spilt milk or worry about it. Focus intently on what you can do and how you can move forward. So, you know, the transportation, the entertainment, the restaurant businesses are at zero right now. They're in survival mode.
Yep.
So the successful people who have responded to that Black Swan event have not said, oh, woe is me. They've said, got to cut costs, got to cut staff, got to save my money, got to figure out who I'm not going to pay, got to apply for PPP grants. You're in a whole new survival mode. So again, we talked about entrepreneurs being coachable and being able to pivot. This is the biggest pivot in the world. And if you're driving down the highway on a foggy night and you look up and there's a semi that's stopped on the highway, your job is not to wonder, well, why is it stopped? Your job is to hit the damn brakes as soon as you can and survive. So there's that part of COVID. The other side of COVID is pivoting around what you can do. Okay, so I'm on a board of trustees of a large not-for-profit. And like many organizations, we have a big event that generates 80, 90% of our revenue. I was very impressed with our leadership that said, okay, it's just not likely we're going to be able to put on this $30,000 person event. So let's figure out how to cancel it, how to shut it down, and then how to go virtual. So two things that are happening, I think, in COVID. Number one, if you have been a little concerned about whether or not you should let people work remotely or how your remote operations should proceed. Well, now you have to move that to front burner. I mean, even this session right here, I've learned so much about how Zoom and Google Meets and GoToMeeting work. You got to adjust that way. So there are people who have said, okay, we're going to cut costs that are unnecessary. I heard one founder on the West Coast said he just came to the realization he was going to cut out all of his physical locations and everybody was going to be virtual. Well, that's extreme, but that's the kind of thinking that entrepreneurs need to engage in to be successful. And then the third one is there are some companies that were trying to get some traction because people were trying to understand how to deal with telehealth, or Tock is doing very, very well in terms of ordering food from restaurants, and people are getting very creative there. So it's opening up, it's forcing people to look at and open up new things. So the people who are creative, coachable, know how to pivot, resilient, resourceful, all those 6 things I mentioned, they're going to survive at worst and come out of the other end of this thing thriving. So, there's no question, COVID is a black swan. It hit all of us at the same time. The people who don't waste time worrying, oh, woe is me, and thinking about how can I get to where I want to be, are the ones who are going to be successful.
That's a great insight. I was listening to an interview with Charles Hudson, and I found it fascinating because he was talking about new investments, right? And how some startups now, some of them are taking off. Like I know a startup actually out of Chicago, touchless payments is doubling every couple of weeks, right? Yep. Because everybody needs to not physically give a credit card or engage. Some businesses that haven't gone digital are going digital.
Right.
He mentioned the hesitation behind betting on the businesses that are doing really well in this time because it may be unique to this time.
That's right.
A little insight into that. Like, do you think that's true? Where do you think it's true? Where do you think it's not true? To hesitate on betting on those businesses.
No, I think Charles is spot on. You have to think. So look, the reason I say that I'm looking at companies that are going to give me 10 times my return within 10 times my return within 10 years before dilution is because it's going to take 10 years for a successful company to really thrive and grow. I mean, you think about an apple tree or something like that. You can't put an apple tree in the ground and hope to be making pies that fall. So on the one side, that this is a black swan that will cripple some companies. On the other hand, it will, as Charles says, give some people an espresso rush of opportunity that is eventually going to fade away once alternative strategies come around. So I think it's important to think through how does maybe taking advantage of this carry on into the post-COVID world, or are we just going to be done with this? I know my daughter is going to be completely through with virtual coffee, happy hours when this is done. She's like, I'm going to every bar that I can find that, and I'm never going to do virtual happy hours with anybody. I went to a virtual funeral the other day, and I was like, I get it, I understand it, but there's no way I'll ever go to a virtual funeral if I don't have to.
Yep, absolutely. It's not the same, but it'll do for where
it'll do for now. Right.
That's right. That's right. No, that's a good insight. Shifting gears to elevating underrepresented, founders. What more, because it's a focus of ours at Rebel One is what more do you think needs to be done on that front?
Well, look, I'm delighted to be on this call right now because I'm sure there are a few folks that are watching or listening or will watch it later on and say, I never saw a black dude who's making early stage investments like that. I didn't know those people existed. There's a lot of value in just seeing people who look like you do what you want to do. I mean, it worked for me throughout the course of my career. I mean, when I was in investment management, I'd walk into either a client's office or a conference and I see another black person. I'm like, I'm not the only one. Oh my gosh, let's talk. And it just, it gives you another level of comfort and confidence. So at a minimum, I think those of us who are investing need to make ourselves available and be very honest and candid and use the vernacular that we know how to use with each other to um, to normalize this whole idea of early stage investing. Like Samara Mejia at Chincona Ventures. I mean, who's seen a young Latina with a fund behind her like that? I mean, you say the words, and if you're a Latinx entrepreneur, you just feel better knowing that there's somebody out there who will give you this straight scoop.
Mm-hmm.
I think the responsibility for people like me and Charles Hudson and other venture firms is to be very candid with entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs to say, okay, you can talk straight to me. I'm trying to figure out how to get rich with you. So let's have a conversation. And, when I go to Mexico and I'm trying to go to the store, being able to speak just a little Spanish makes that conversation with the person who's trying to help me so much better. If I'm in Paris and I try to speak a little French, just that attempt to communicate at a level that is more familiar to the receiver does things so much better. So I was on a conference call this morning, and I told somebody, I said, hey, you just got to avoid investors who aren't woke. And they all fell out laughing because who knows what woke means,
Exactly. I love that. I've used that a few times, but you have to, you want to make sure the audience, if they, like you said, if they know what it means, they're partway there.
That's right. That's right.
And then for those that want to jump in on the investor side, more underrepresented investors, as we need more, not only female partners at venture capital funds, but also underrepresented. What would you say to those people thinking of jumping in the game as you did so long ago?
Yeah, you got to write a check. You got to write a check. I mean, you could be Michael Phelps' roommate, wear the same size clothes and gloves and shoes that he wears, eat the same food, do his same out of water exercises, but unless you get wet, you will never know how to swim. So I tell people all the time, when I was 34, I said to myself, man, if I don't write a check by the time I'm 35, I'm just going to be a corporate Dilbert for the rest of my life. I got to do this. So I'm not going to say that it was the most appealing investment, or that I was, in retrospect, would I have done that again? No, but I had a good partner. I had a good entrepreneur, and I was not going to not do it. So I wrote a pretty big check to get started. And I think you can put a paper portfolio together all day long. You can go to demo days. You can listen to people, but you got to write a check. And now, fortunately, there are ways for you to write a check. My favorite website for being able to write a check is WeFunder. WeFunder allows you to actually invest in companies and watch their progression. Unlike Kickstarter and unlike GoFundMe's or Indiegogo, where you're buying products and prepaying for those things, you're actually investing in those companies. So you can write a check for $1,000, for $4,000. I was not an accredited investor when I first started investing. And, I learned much, much more. I think I probably learned, Sergio, more from losing money than I did from making money. So you have to put some money out there that you can afford to lose and call it tuition.
Love it. I love that. So I'm gonna close with that. That was beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Wilkins from Standing Oak Venture Partners, a private investor out of the Chicago region. Thank you for joining us, Tony. This is Rebel One Live. You can find and connect with Tony on the link to his website are in the show notes. But join us every week where we're interviewing amazing investors and founders focus on elevating impact. So thank you, Tony.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sergio. Have a great one. Stay healthy.